Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, dear legal eagles, welcome to the Global Institute of Law, Oxford. My name is Zubair Abbasi and I head the Global Institute of Law, Oxford. We promise that we will be bringing to you leading experts, scholars, and practitioners from different fields of law and the branches of knowledge which are associated with law. We will kickstart our session with forensic sciences today. We are very pleased that Dr. Zaheer has joined us to lead a session for forensic sciences for lawyers. Dr. Zaheer has been teaching and researching forensic sciences for the past several years. He has been offering this course at LUMS, and he has also undertaken his research at Cambridge University as Charles Walls Fellow. Without further ado, I will hand over to Dr. Zaheer, who will introduce us forensic sciences. Thank you very much, Dr. Zaheer, and over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Zubair, and thank you for the invite as well, and giving this opportunity to speak with the lawyers and share some flavor of the sciences. So let me share my slides with you so that we could start. And the topic of my talk is the forensic science for lawyers. So how many of you have watched this series, Sherlock, which has been aired for almost 4 years, from 2010 to 2017, and with a very high ranking of 9.1 out of 10. This is a very famous character by Sir Arthur, who invented or introduced this character of the Sherlock, who is a detective, and there are many films which have been created on this topic, and there are many series and so on. If you haven't watched this, it is available on Netflix, but if you haven't watched this series, there is another one. This is the Forensic Files, and so far 14 seasons of this documentary type TV series has been have been streamed, and it also has a very high rating of 8.8 out of 10s. Now, last but not least, there is a whole series consisting of 15 seasons, and this is called the CSI Crime Scene Investigation, and it has been aired between 2000 and 2015, and it also has a very high rating as a TV series. So, all these series which I have just mentioned, they show you the detectives using science for, solving the many cases, criminal cases, and using science in the criminal investigations. But how this forensic science actually works? That this is the question which I will try to answer in today's session. So we know that because of all these series, there is a public awareness about the forensic science and how it could be basically used in criminal and civil investigations. So let me first introduce you to the term forensic science. Forensic science, in simple words, is the application of science to law. Unfortunately, I'm not much familiar with the law, and the only laws I know are the in-laws. But forensic science deals with the, broadly speaking, two kind of law. One is the criminal law, and other is the civil law. You might know that in criminal law, we basically emphasize on the punishment and rehabilitation. It deals with the threatening, yeah, or the endangering the property, health, safety, and the moral welfare. And then the other one is the civil law, which emphasizes on the dispute resolution and victim compensation. So in simple words, it's the how we apply science to criminal and civil law. And forensic science is basically, it's a very umbrella term. It consists of a almost 11 professions in it, according to American Academy of the Forensic Science. For example, um, if we are studying some, if we are analyzing the poisons, then we are studying basically the toxicology, which is a subdivision of forensic science. Then there's a pathology where we study the disease causing organisms. And then this is the most efficient uh, method in the forensic science, which is the DNA analysis. And DNA is a very powerful technique to reach uh, the suspect of any crime, or to reach the criminals. Then there's the firearm analysis, in which the gunshot analysis, the residue analysis, and the marking on the bullets. And then this is the question document analysis. If there is some forging in the document, if there is erasures, and there are some overwritings. So this also includes in forensic science. Then there's the fingerprint analysis, which is the second most powerful tool after DNA analysis. And photography is also included in forensic science, because by this technique we basically record the physical evidences collected from a crime scene. And lastly, there is this odontology, in which the record of the tooth analysis, and markings of the teeth can be used to reach the criminals. Uh, Basically, we use some domains of the science, like chemistry, biology, geology, computer technology, and in order to determine the value of the evidence that is collected from a crime scene. So this is just giving you a background of what forensic science is. But there is a very, very important phenomenon that we need to keep in mind. I mentioned some of the TV series like CSI and Sherlock and others. They have created an effect which is called the CSI effect. And let me tell you what this effect is. That because of, in all these series, the scientific principles or scientific procedures are oversimplified. And in other terms, they are basically, they do appear unrealistic to some extent. But because of this oversimplification of science, there is an unrealistic expectation associated with the forensic science, right? And in these shows, you will see that only a one person or a two person or group of persons, they are doing all this stuff, like they're collecting the evidence from the crime scene, they are processing the evidence, they are questioning the witness, they interrogate the suspects, they carry out search warrants, and then also testify in the court. So in real life, this doesn't happen like that, because we do have dedicated persons for all these jobs which I just mentioned. Um, and in all these shows, basically all these scientific procedures and the analysis is shown to, just finish in a couple of minutes or in some minutes. But in reality, the analysis of the evidence could take, days or even weeks or months or even years to complete. So this is another oversimplification which we see in all these shows. So what is the effect of all these observations which I just told you? Because of this dramatization, public now believes that every crime scene will yield some forensic evidence. And according to the jurists, they now think that uh, this phenomenon, which is the CSI effect, ultimately detracts from the search for truth and justice in the courtroom. So we should be, keep that in mind, that there are some unrealistic expectations that are associated with the forensic science only because of the talk shows. Okay, let me tell you briefly how the forensic science basically originated. And it is very interesting to note down that it has some literally origins. This I mentioned Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who basically created the fictional character of Sherlock Holmes. And he was an eye doctor, and at the beginning of his career, he was not getting much patience. So, in order to kill the time, he started writing fiction. And because of the his medical background, he, used many things which were not basically existing at that time. For example, he in his writings, he mentioned the serology, which is the analysis of blood and whatever there is in the blood, fingerprinting, firearm identification, and even the question document examination. So this is at a time when forensic science, or the use of forensic science in law, was not existing at all. So we can say that it was forensic science was there in the fiction before it was really applied to the criminal justice system. So this is why we call that it has some origin it has some the literally origin. Let me give you the example. In the very first book of the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, A Study in Scarlet. It was published in 1887. You know that this is the time when Sherlock introduces himself with the Dr. Watson. This is the very first meeting of Dr. Watson with Sherlock Holmes. So as the Dr. Watson enters into the room, Sherlock is busy doing with some stuff. So basically, he is trying to develop a analysis method, by which you can differentiate a pant spot and a, dried blood spot. And he said then at that time, when the Watson enters, he exclaims that he has invented a reagent that precipitates hemoglobin. So basically, if you add that precipitate to the spot, it will make some solids, like just as the yogurt looks in the appearance, it will look exactly the same. So that will be an indication that the given spot is of blood and not of any paint. So then in the history of the forensic science, the very first record which we do have is of the Orfila. He is basically considered the father of the forensic toxicology, which is the study of poisons and how they affect the bodies. And he published some scientific papers on the detection of poisons and how they affect the animals. And then we have this other person here, which you can basically see. Um, this is Bertillon, who basically devised the first scientific system of personal identification. So it was the Bertillon who proposed a very interesting system of personal identification. He said that we can use the body measurements as a mean to distinguish from one individual from the other. And that was the very first attempt of the personal identification based on some body measurements. This person is the most important person in the history of the forensic science. His name is Francis Galton. He basically was the first person who thought that fingerprints can be basically used for personal identification. And he also devised a method by which we can classify fingerprints into different patterns, and we can file them up. He also, published a book in 1892, and that sets the basic principles that are behind the present system of the identification of fingerprints. Okay, I will not mention all the persons who were a part of the evolution of the forensic science, But there are some persons like Lattice, who was the person who introduced the method by which we can determine the blood group from a dried blood stain. And then the other persons, I'm skipping some of them to take you to some other more important persons like Macron. Macron basically was the person who used microscopy with other analytical methods to examine the physical evidence. Let me tell you that in the forensic science, the use of a microscope is very, very common because we use it for the analysis of firearms, bullet analysis, bullet markings. We can use it to examine the documents. It is also used for the comparison of the two fibers, whether they have the same origin. We can use it for the analysis of the hair. So it's a very important and essential tool of forensic scientists, the microscope. So in the history, another important person which I should mention is Edmund Lockhart. So Lockhart basically believed that when a person comes in contact with an object or another person, a cross transfer of material occurs. And this principle is the Lockhart's exchange principle, and that is the basis of the many principles that are basically uh, which are present in forensic science. So Lockhart was also the first person who created the first crime lab or the forensic lab in Lyon, France in 1910. Then in 1914, another lab was created in Canada. Then in 15, it also started in Germany. In Austria, it started in 1923. In USA, the forensic lab was established in 1924 in Los Angeles. And then it was the FBI who made this forensic lab or the crime lab in 1932. In UK, the use of forensic science started in 1935. But let me tell you a very interesting thing. The very interesting thing is that the crime laboratories in subcontinent were started far before than they were, anywhere in the world. For example, in 1906, first forensic or the crime lab was established in Lahore by the Criminal Investigation Department. Then we have some other labs, for example, Forensic Science Lab, which is now the Forensic Science Agency now. It was established in 1976. That on the same year, we have another lab in Peshawar, which is now the Institute of Forensic Science. In 1983 or 84, a lab was established in Quetta, and National Forensic Science Agency was established in 2006, which is Islamabad based, and it is the National Forensic Science Agency. And the most important one is the Punjab Forensic Science Agency, which was established in 2012. And this is the second largest forensic lab in the world. Okay. For example, it has 13 departments. There are many, vacant positions for the junior and senior scientists. They were also published in newspapers recently. And in 2018 alone, there were almost 89,000 cases that were received in Punjab Forensic Science Agency. So you can see that the level of the involvement of Punjab Forensic Science Agency in the criminal investigations. For example, they were there in the Zainab murder case in 2017 by using the computer forensics and the DNA analysis. They basically reached the murderer. Okay, so after introducing you to some of the historical developments of the forensic sciences, let me tell you that what does a crime lab or the forensic lab basically does, what services it offers. So it basically depends that what kind of departments are there in a crime lab. It varies from one lab to the other lab, but there are some departments that are common in every forensic lab. For example, in a typical forensic lab, there is always a biology unit where biologists are the biochemists do the DNA profiling. They match the DNA collected from the crime scene to this with that of the suspect, and then see whether they closely match or not. And then they also do hair and fiber analysis, some kind of analysis of blood, and so on. Then there's the firearm unit, which examines the firearms, for example, discharged bullets, cartridge cases, shotguns, and so on. Another important unit is the physical science unit. Mostly it consists of the chemical sciences, where instrumental analysis, we use many tools, or the instruments are wet chemical methods to analyze the evidence, which could be, any drug, a piece of glass, some paint, explosives, soil, fingerprints, and so on. Besides these three units, there are some others. For example, a document examination unit studies the handwriting and typewriting. They also analyze the paper and the composition of ink, or the indented writing, obliterations, erasures, burned or charged documents, and it also uses many principles from the physical sciences. Then, essential part of every crime lab is the photography unit, which do the digital imaging. They also use infrared light, ultraviolet light, X-ray photography, in order to just make invisible information visible to the naked eye. One of the most important division or the unit of every crime lab is the latent fingerprint unit, which basically processes and examines evidences for the latent fingerprints. Latent fingerprints are those fingerprints which are not visible to the naked eye. I have added some, methods by which I will show you how we can develop some of the fingerprints with some basic tools which we can even have in our kitchen or at home. So there's a toxicology unit that does the analysis of poisons and drugs in the body, fluids and organs. Then there's the crime scene investigation unit. Normally, at the crime scene, it is the law enforcement agencies, for example, police, that arrives, and they, secure the crime scene with the help of these yellow tapes and so on. But it is crime scene investigation is also now an essential part of the forensic lab. It is because that there is always some kind of physical evidence present at the crime scene, which need not to be, destroyed by any means. And these people of the CSI unit, they are trained to, locate the evidence, preserve it, collect it, and, send it for the analysis. And then there is less common unit, which is called the polygraph unit. With the help of some instruments, it is used on the persons to see whether they are lying or they are telling the truth. So this is called the polygraphy type of unit. Then there are some other branches as well, like computer forensics or the digital forensics, that deals with the mobile phones and the computers and the deleted data, or what kind of internet search a person was doing before committing any crime and so on. So they try to find out any trail. Then there's a forensic psychiatry, which centers on this question that why people commit crimes. And then it is the forensic anthropology, which does the analysis of the skeletal remains. And, if there is no way to, identify a person, then they can do the facial reconstruction in order to, do the identification of any dead person. We have this forensic odontology, which identifies the dental records, bite marks, and so on for the identification purposes. In forensic geology, we do the analysis of soil or minerals. For example, the dust present in the shoes can give the clues where the suspect was present before committing the crime, or whether he was present on the crime scene or not. And last but not least is the forensic entomology. This helps us in finding the time of death, because right after death, there are many organisms that are produced within the bodies, including some insects. And by examining these insects, we can predict that at what time the person basically died. So that was a brief introduction of the what forensic science or the crime lab basically does. So although there are you have seen that it's a quite a broad area. Forensic science is very broad area, and it encompasses many scientific disciplines. And today I will exclusively be focusing only on one aspect, which is the fingerprint analysis. But before doing that, let me give you some examples of some of the case studies in which all these disciplines, which I just mentioned, were used. For example, this is a very famous person in American history. This is Bundy. He used to kidnap, rape, and kill numerous young women, and he was very clever. He was a law student, and he was very clever that he never left any clue behind. And then he left one of his bit marks on the victims, and this bite mark, matched with its teeth record, and this is how he was convicted and sentenced to death in 1989. We have this case in Pakistan. It's a very sad incident of the PK661, which crashed on December 7, 2016, and you know that all the 47 people which were on board, they all died. And the famous singer Junaid Jamshed's body was identified initially on the basis of the facial X-ray and tooth record. Of course, laterly they also did the DNA analysis, but initial screening was done with the help of forensic odontology. I have some more examples to present here. For example, in April or May 2016, 32 people died in Laya after eating laddu. This is a very famous Pakistani and Indian sweet. So forensic analysis of the sweet, forensic analysis of the blood of the victims showed the presence of a pesticide. Pesticide is, basically a chemical that is used to kill the pests, the insects which are there, which destroy the crops. And then owner of the shop confessed, and he was then convicted. So this shows that how forensic toxicology can play its role in reaching the criminals. You might also remember this case, which was in, I forgot the year, but around 200 people died and 1,000 became seriously ill in Pakistan after taking some cardiac medicine, which is used to treat some conditions of the heart. So this tablet was the isotab. And forensic analysis of this tablet showed that it was contaminated with a dangerous chemical, pyrimethamine, and it was accidentally added to the batch, and that led to the death of 200 people. It basically caused the bleeding from mouth and the gastrointestinal, or the belly region area. And because of this excessive bleeding, that led to the death of the persons. Then there is the case in Karachi. I think there was an update this year on this case as well. There was a garment factory in Baldia town, Karachi, which was basically fired in 2020, and then the debris was collected from the crime scene and by the crime scene investigation department. And after the analysis, we came to know that some fire accelerant was used. It was not an accidental fire because of the short circuiting or some other reason, but it was initiated with the help of a fire accelerant. And, so somebody really did this building set on fire. And then this, you might know this corruption charges cases on Maryam Nawaz Sharif in 2017, and there were some documents submitted to forensic analysis. And when the forensic analysis of documents was done, it was found that it uses a font that was not even there when the documents were produced. So that led to the conclusion that these documents were forged. So these are some of the cases in which some aspect of forensic science helped to reach a conclusion or to reach the criminal. And it shows you the examples from document identification, from toxicology, from fire analysis, and so on. Okay, so let me now tell you about the functions a forensic scientist basically performs. So very obvious thing is that when we collect an evidence from the crime scene, it will be the forensic scientist that is going to analyze that evidence, right? But you know that this is just the 50% of the time a forensic scientist will do. I mean, to stay in lab and do the analysis. It just constitutes only the 50% of it this time. Okay, and then a question might have you might have a question now that, okay, what is the 50, what about the rest of the 50% of the time? So I will come back to this question in a while. Let me tell you briefly about the scientific method, what a scientific method is. So in scientific method, we start with the observations. We use our five senses, we use some tools and make some observations. And based on these observations, we make a hypothesis, right? And then this hypothesis is tested with the help of experiments. And on the experiments, we do get some results. We analyze these results, make some conclusions. And based on these conclusions, we either accept the hypothesis or reject it. If the hypothesis is accepted, we call it a theory. And if it is rejected, we can make another hypothesis and pass it through the experimentation, analysis, and conclusion, this whole cycle, in order to decide whether it is accepted or not. So in this scientific method is also a model for the criminal investigators. Say they also make the use of observations, they make some hypotheses, because a forensic scientist has to deal with the events that had happened in past. So he had to reconstruct all these events in order to reach some conclusion. Okay, and he or she also uses the scientific method in order to reach some conclusion, or in order to tell whether a suspect actually did commit any crime or not. Then the other part of the forensic scientist is to provide expert testimony in court, right? So there are many cases which guide us. For example, there's a very famous case in the US. With this case is the Diaz versus Massachusetts, and that provides us the guideline that a forensic scientist must be present in the court, okay, to testify. This basically gives the defendant an opportunity to cross-examine the results of the analyst, okay, and there is also some requirements that for the witness must possess a particular skill or knowledge. For example, he must be educated in the field, or he must have some training or experience in the field in order to testify or present himself or herself as the witness. And then the witness must be able to explain scientific data or the conclusion, okay? And also with some statistics or with some probability that how sure he or she is in order to draw these conclusions. And we also know that opposing attorney may cross-examine the witness in order to just to find whether he does possess some proper training or knowledge in the field, or just to find some of the weaknesses in the case. Then we have the Department of Justice that provides us the guidelines about the ethical responsibilities of the forensic examiners. Let me tell you some briefly about the admissibility of the evidence. Okay, so remember, it's not the lab where the ultimate significance of the evidence is determined. It is the courtroom where the evidence or the significance of the evidence will be established. So we have some guidelines. For example, we have the Fry standards. Fry standards means that the procedure or technique or the principles which we use to analyze the evidence, they must be accepted by the scientific community. Okay, so there should be a broad acceptance of all the methods or procedures which we are using to analyze the evidence. This is called the Fry standard. So there's a whole case. You can see this is the Fry versus United States in 1923 that provides us the basic guideline about the admissibility of the evidence. Then there is another very famous case, which was basically between the Daubert and the Dow Pharmaceutical. So Daubert was basically a child who was born with birth defects, and then his parents sued the Dow Pharmaceuticals because they claimed that during the pregnancy, her mother was using bendectin. So bendectin is a medicine that is prescribed for the early morning sickness during pregnancy, nausea, and so on. So Daubert's parents claim that it is because of the use of that medicine, early morning sickness medicine, that their child has the birth defects. And then at that time, there was no evidence, there was no link between the use of bendectin and the birth defects. But Daubert, with the help of his attorney, he did some literature review, and he collected many evidences, and he provided some studies on the animals, which did show that there is some link between the use of bendectin and the birth defects. But the problem was that the evidence didn't meet the Fry standards. So then there was the another famous decision that was made in the Daubert versus the Dow Pharmaceuticals, and which says that if the technique adds something, it helps the understand the evidence, or it increases the value of the evidence, then we can use any new technique which is not yet uh, you know acclaimed or accepted by a wide scientific community. So this gave the opportunity to add those analysis tools or analysis techniques that were not yet broadly used by the scientific community. Okay, so in order to admissibility of the evidence is that how basically this scientific evidence is judged, and what the court advocates in the case of this Daubert. So, this is it is said that it is the ultimate responsibility uh, of the court or the judge in order to determine the admissibility and reliability of the scientific evidence that is being presented in their courts. So it is solely the judge who will determine what is presented in their court as a physical evidence and what its reliability and admissibility value. So I think there's a lot about the court or the law or the law side of the forensic science, but I will skip it and take you to the first part, which is the crime scene investigation. So far I have told you some of the basics of the forensic science. For example, I talked about what forensic science is, how it has some influence from the TV shows, how it was historically developed, and what a forensic science basically does. What are the main units of a forensic lab, and what is the admissibility or the court side of the forensic science. Okay, the very first thing is the crime scene investigation. Why I want to talk about it? It is because that it is the crime scene where the forensic science starts, not the lab, not the laboratory, but the crime scene itself where the forensic science starts. So, when there is a crime, it is the law enforcement agencies that reach the crime, and it is their job basically to, secure the scene with the help of these yellow tapes, and, number the where the victim is located, just mark its place, entry, exit, and many other where the physical evidence is located, and so other stuff, and evacuate the area in order to so that the physical evidence is not destroyed. Okay, so at the crime scene, the very first thing is the securing and isolation of the crime scene. I have told you how it is done. The second thing is to look for the physical evidence. And in order to do that, crime scene is recorded with the help of notes. One can take the notes, one can use the photography, one can take the sketches. For example, this is the sketch of a room where, all the belongings and where is the body is located, what else is there, how many doors, where is the sofa located, where is the name that's present, and all other stuff. So the whole crime scene can be sketched roughly with the help of, with the help of ballpoints, or even with the help of a pencil. And then it is searched for the presence of physical evidence. This physical evidence is then, collected, preserved, and sent for the analysis. So this is why I thought to mention, because if the evidence at the crime scene is destroyed, the role of forensic science is, totally eliminated. So now that's why Punjab Forensic Science Agency has their own crime CSI unit, and their job is to reach the crime scene and, collect the evidence from the crime scene without, damaging it. Okay, there are some things which need to be taken care at the crime scene. And very first thing is how we can handle the physical evidence. And we need a special protocol for that. There is some personal protection equipment we need to have at the time. So, for example, we need to handle and process the evidence in a way that it is not contaminated, it is not broken, or evaporated, scratched, bent, or carelessly packed so that it falls off. Uh, okay, then we need to have these, gloves. For example, I also have these latex gloves with me. Uh, we can also have these disposable forceps for the, instead of touching the things, we use the forceps to pick and, store them. We also need this safety suit, and then mask, if and the safety glasses, just for the personal security, because as there are, if there are body fluids there, they may infect the persons at the crime scene. And then we also need not to contaminate the evidence with our, sweat, or, body oils, and so on. So that's why we need to have. And then, for example, there are many common sense things we can do at the crime scene. For example, if there's a blood stain at the wall, that's a potential physical evidence. So we can try to, take a wet swab and to take it off from the wall. We can scratch it off from the wall and, preserve and save it and send it for the analysis. There are special packaging that is used for the various kinds of the physical evidences are here. So these small metallic containers are used for these purposes. And then we have this manila envelope, which is used for the biological evidence. It is because that biological evidence should, fungus will grow, and it may be destroyed totally. So there must be some air in it. That's why we prefer to use these paper bags. So they are then labeled as the biohazard, and then, sent for the analysis. And it is important to remember that we need to wear the mask, Tyvek suit, latex gloves, and all other personal protection equipment. We also have sealed plastic bags. They look exactly similar to the Ziploc type of bags, and they also have a whole writings or labels on their uh, so that we can, write who is collecting the evidence. There's this called the this is called the whole custody of the chains. So you know that we need to take the record of everything we are doing with the physical evidence. Who is collecting at what time, and what, from where it was collected, and who packed it, who sent it to the lab, who received it at the lab. So we need to take the record of all uh, all the all the custodies. So this is called the chain of custodies. If we are to collect some charged debris from the crime scene, where something was set afire. So we can use these large metallic containers with a lid on them. And because normally debris is quite large in size, so we need to collect them. And for the drug or the powder type of things, we can use this druggist fold. So druggist fold is very easy to make. You might have seen that some hakims and pharmacists, if they are giving you some powder, uh, they make you this druggist fold. So druggist fold is easy to make. I hope that you are able to see me. I have this paper in my hand. You can fold it one third to one side and one third to the other side, and then you also try to fold this and here, and then you will just put one end, this end, into the other end here. And this is what a druggist fold is called. So it's a very, very important type of fold by which basically we can secure the powders that are collected from the crime scene, and it is called the druggist uh, fold because it has been used by the pharmacists to pack the powder type of drugs. Okay, there are some legal considerations at the crime scene which we need to in order to collect the evidence, you need the search warrants, and there are some personal, according to Fourth Amendment, we have some personal privileges in the case of U.S., and that you not disturb. You should. Um, it is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, house, papers, and effect, and they have a kind of privacy. We need to take care of all this stuff before trying to enter some place to collect the physical evidence. Okay, I think this is just a brief because of the shortage of the time. Let me skip this legal concentrations and move to what is planned for today. And this is basically the analysis of the fingerprints. Okay, fingerprints analysis is very important because after DNA, it is the most strong kind of evidence that helps us in solving the crimes. So briefly about the history of the fingerprints, Chinese used to sign documents even 3000 BC, and even in India in 1800s, late 1800s, a British army officer used to take the signatures, thumb marks as the signatures, and this was at a moment when use of fingerprints was not anywhere in the world. And this was in 1815, and it is English civil servant, sorry, not the army. And in then 1880, this Henry Fuld is known to, be the father of these fingerprints analysis, because he recognized for the first time that these ridges on the skin and their pattern can be an important source for the identification of the individuals. Interestingly, it was in 1880 when he published papers in the very famous journal Science. And in 1884, Mark Twain basically wrote that the fingerprints retain from the cradle to the grave, and that could be a source of the identification. And remember, this was at the moment when there wasn't any forensic science, there wasn't any use of the fingerprints for the personal identification. And this famous writer, Mark Twain, realized that in 1884. So I would also, I have already told you that it was the Galton who suggested the methods by which we can record the fingerprints. And then there are some other persons like Richard Henry. Henry's classification has been very famous before the computers invaded everything. And we used to use the Henry's classification for the identification with the help of fingerprints. And then from 1901, fingerprints was officially used in USA for personal identification. It was adopted by England and Europe in 1914. And, in 1999, in USA courts, the admissibility of the fingerprint was challenged in the very famous case of the United States versus Michel. But the court decided that fingerprints are basically the individual kind of evidence, and no two persons can have the same set of fingerprints. So that was basically divided by decided by the USA court in 1999. Let me tell you about the basic principles that are involved in the fingerprint analysis. And very first basic principle in fingerprint analysis is that no two individuals in this world have identical fingerprints, which means that fingerprint is an individual characteristic, right? And what are these fingerprints? Because we do have on our palms of hand, and also there on the soles, and this is how they look like here. And if we closely observe, we can basically see, for example, if you look at here, so these are basically ridges and furrows on our fingertips, and they have some characteristic features. For example, this branch here is starting and dividing into two. This is called bifurcation. And then there are some others. For example, um, uh, these are basically, in the fingerprints, there are many features which these ridges basically has. We call them the characteristics of the ridges, or the minutiae of the ridges. And I'm telling you some of the minutiae. For example, this ridge here starts and then divides into two. This characteristic minutiae is the bifurcation. Then there are many others. For example, if you can see here, this ridge is coming from here, and then there's a loop that closes, and then the ridge is continuing in the opposite direction. So in the magnified view, this is basically the enclosure. So ridges could have several patterns. On here, you can see that there's a small dot here, and there's one continued ridge here on the one side. There's another ridge on the opposite side, and this dot looks like an island. That's why this kind of minutiae is called the island kind of minutiae. Then there are some other bifurcation I have already told you. If you look at here, this ridge comes here and then appears, takes the form of a hook, and that's why we call it a hook type of minutiae. And there are many others, for example, scar, and if it ends like here, if ends in nothing, and if it just, we call it the basically the ending of a ridge without any characteristic features. So in principle, there could be 150 such ridge characteristics, which I just told you. For example, they could bifurcate, they could enclose, they could take the form of an island, they could appear like hook, and so on. So we call them the minutiae. So these minutiae are basically what gives the fingerprints their individuality, right? Because of this, because these minutiae and their location, I mean their identity, how do they look like, where they're located, their location, and their number is basically what gives them the individuality. So what basically we do, that the fingerprints we collect from the crime scene, we collect them and identify these minutiae on the fingerprints. But you know that in order to compare a fingerprint taken from the crime scene with the one of the suspect, we need to have the fingerprints of the suspect as well for the comparison purposes, right? So we mark the minutiae, okay, whether it is a bifurcation, where it is located, where is the hook located, where is the scar located, and so on. And then we compare them if they exactly match in both patterns. Okay, so there could be 150 such ridge characteristics in the fingerprints. How many are enough to compare between the match and this, between the suspect and the record. So this is basically it is decided by the judge or the court, but it is thought that 10 to 16 ridge pattern comparison is more than enough to impart individuality. Okay, so this was the very first principle of the fingerprint analysis, which says that no two persons in this earth can have the same or identical fingerprints. The second thing is basically which we call that fingerprints are permanent. They remain there from your birth to the death. But let me tell you that they are there before the birth, because fingerprints are basically created when a person is just a fetus, okay, in the uterus. So if we look into the structure of these fingerprints, skin has basically two layers. This outer layer here is what we call the epidermis. This is just the name of the outer layer. Let me take this maybe laser pointer to highlight. So this is the outer layer. This is also contains some pores in it, right? And then this internal layer here is called the dermis. And between the dermis and epidermis, there is a cell layer, which is called the papillae. And this shape of the papillae basically decides what kind of ridges you will have on your palms and your fingertips. Okay. And they are there, I think, at some bit, I forgot at what week of the pregnancy they basically appear, but they are, there before your birth, and then they will persist the whole for the whole life. If we see in the dermis, there are some glands which are called the sweat glands. They have these ducts which end up in pores, and sweat glands, make sweat, and that is basically released from the skin. And in sweat is basically a mixture of various chemicals. It has salts, it has some oils, it has water, and this is what, when we perspire, our fingertips get this sweat, which is a mixture of oil and salts and other things. And when we touch something, for example, I'm holding this mobile. When I touch something, I leave an impression here. And why there's an impression? Because I'm secreting a mixture of oils and water, and they are creating a mark on everything I touch, right? But you can't see these fingerprints over my phone at the moment. I can't see them. But if I look them at certain angle, I can, they become visible to us. And there are many other physical and chemical methods by which we can, visualize them. So such fingerprints which are not visible to the naked eye are called the latent fingerprints. And there are many ways by which we can basically make them visible. So I have so far mentioned two principles that are involved in the fingerprint analysis. First one is that no two individuals has the same fingerprints. Second principle is that fingerprints are permanent. They stay for the whole life from birth, even before the birth to the grave. So this was the second principle. The third principle is that all fingerprints can be classified into various patterns. I mean, we can broadly classify these ridges into three classes, three patterns. One is called the loop, other is called the whirl, and the third one is called the arch. So in arch, if we see that ridge starts from one end, and then it it extends and then leaves the pattern from the other side. Okay. In loop, if we see that the the ridge starts from one point, and then it curves back and leaves the pattern. So this is called basically the loop. And in whirl, you can see that there are many circles. There are ridge patterns that are rounded or circular in shape, and this is how the most famous type of the pattern we have on our fingers is basically the loop type of patterns. You can basically try to examine. I can give you one activity by which you can basically find what kind of pattern do you have on your fingerprints. So it's very easy. If you have a ballpoint with you, or a lipstick maybe, or an ink pad, you can, for example, I'm taking this ballpoint and trying to ink my thumb with the help of this ballpoint, or even this lead black pencil. This works really well, and then I can gently press it against this paper. And when I do that, my mark will appear on this paper. And then next thing will be that I can take a magnifying glass. For example, I have this in my hand and try to look what kind of patterns do I have. Do I have loops? Do I have arch? And do I have the whorls? These are generally patterns. And remember that this is just the first type of the analysis. Whenever we find some fingerprints at the crime scene, we try to find, okay, what this fingerprint is. Is it loop, whorl, or arches? The second thing is what we do, we try to find out minutiae, at least 10 to 16 minutiae, and their location, and then we compare them with the uh, finger impression that is there in the record, right? And then we make some decisions. See, the most famous is the loop is basically, most famous pattern is basically the loop. And then the second one is whorl, and the least common is the arches. So I was telling you that you can take many steps. You can mark your fingers, let's say your index finger, with the help of any ballpoint ink or ink pad or even a lipstick, and press it gently against the paper. Your mark will be there on the paper. You can take this magnifying glass and look into to see what kind of pattern do you have in on your fingers. Okay, if you do not have the magnifying glass, you can take your mobile. You have a camera in your mobile home, and with the camera you can zoom in and zoom out. So by zooming in and zooming out, you can closely watch these ridge pattern or fingerprint and see whether it is a loop, it is a whorl, or it is an arch, right? So this was the third principle, that ridge patterns, they allow us to classify them systematically. Okay, we can classify them into various classes like loops, whorls, and arches. And this basically makes the fundamental of the fingerprint analysis. In fingerprint analysis, we use this ACE-V protocol. And what is this ACE-V protocol? A means analysis. So very first thing, that we get the fingerprint from the crime scene and we analyze it, whether it is good for further processing or not. Is it damaged? It is complete or not? So this will be the very first thing. So examiner analysis, yeah, analyzes the features in a print left at the crime scene. In analysis, we also we also check, okay, is it a whorl, it is a loop, or it is a arch. And then in the second step, what we do, that we bifurcation and island and other kind of minutiae, and we compare the two fingerprints in terms of the number of minutiae they have, their location, and how many minutiae are basically matching with each other. In this example, you see that two of the minutiae are matching exactly, but the third one here, we are not clear about this one, right? So third step will be the evaluation. So what we conclude from the comparison. Does the print come from the same finger? Yes, no, or unsure. There are three conclusions, right? So this is called the ACE. And the last one is the verification. And verification is done by a person that is a totally different examiner. And he will go through all these three steps. He will do the analysis, he will do the comparison, and he will evaluate, right? And in this way, we make sure that conclusions made from the fingerprint analysis by following the ACE-V protocol are fair enough. But sometimes in the crime labs, the person who is evaluating you or verifying you is one of your colleagues. So this is some kind of bias comes into. He knows, okay, if you are working in the crime lab and the evaluator knows, oh, this might be coming from Salman or some other guy. So sometimes, this in we call it the independent reviewer. So this fundamental uh, fundamental uh, quality is missing in this so-called independent reviewer. Okay, sometimes it's not the totally independent as it should be. So that creates some kind of confusion. Okay, now let me tell you that how we can basically develop the fingerprints. Okay, so fingerprints are basically of two types. If you are, if your hands touch the blood and you then touch some wall or mirror or elsewhere, your fingerprints will be clearly marked, right? So they will be visible. Or, if it is kind of mud or some other soft surface is there, you are touching the soft surface and you're, you know, uh, creating your fingerprints on the soft surface. So these kind of fingerprints are visible. And then there are other kinds which are called the latent. And latent are those fingerprints which we cannot see. For example, I have, and these latent fingerprints could be on two type of surfaces. One surface could be hard surface. For example, I have this glass in my hand, and I think you can't see any, if there is any fingerprints on it. I will show you how I can basically process them to show you that it does contain some fingerprints on it. And the hard surface could also be, some metal surface. For example, I have this jar. Its tip is metallic. I can also have some, Coke can or the can of the Pepsi. This will be also a metal surface. Some, other kind of hard, non-absorbent absorbent type of surfaces. Uh, so if we have some hard type of surfaces, like I showed you here, for example, this glass here and some other thing, we can make use of some powders and a simple brush in order to make the fingerprints visible. For example, I have this thing in I have this petri dish. You can take simple plate, even a simple container. I have this container from the National Marmalade, I think. So you can take another similar kind of container. And what I did, I took this, lead black pencil, this one, and I, with the help of this knife or paper cutter, I, scratched it gently in order to get a powder of it. So this powder can help me, create the fingerprints, invisible fingerprints on the hard surfaces. So in order to do that, it's better that I, put the mask on because it's a very fine dust. And then what next I need this camel hair brush. There are of many types, but you can, some of them are made up of glass fiber. They are the most accurate ones, but these are normally used for the makeup type of things. We can also make use of them. So the first thing will be, in order to, uh, I will dab it into my powder, and then I will try to quickly, easily try to place it on the glass I have. And now by this simple procedure, I'm not sure if you're able to see this one. I have created this fingerprint, which now looks black, right? Here on this glass. So with the help of a very simple brush, camel hair brush, and a simple powder which you can take from, create from even single black pencil, you can create. So I have created this fingerprint here, but it is not safe here. I need to lift it up. And in order to lift it up, just give me a minute. What I'm going to use, I have this scotch tape here, right? And with the help of this scotch tape, what I will do, I will put this scotch tape here and try to cover this up with the help of the scotch tape. I should have the gloves because I'm also putting other, fingerprints on this glass, and then can I easily lift it up and lift it up, and then I can put it on. Let's say if I have this fingerprint card, I can transfer this fingerprint from here to basically here. I was not being careful, so I got many other marks, but I think this was the purpose, that I have lifted a fingerprint that was totally invisible on this glass, and I have transferred it to here with the help of simple Scotch tape, transparent Scotch tape. And this is ready. Now I will sign it from where it was collected and what was the date, what was the time, and then I will hand it over for the analysis in the crime lab. So this was easy peasy how you can basically lift fingerprints from the hard surfaces with the help of powders, which are very easy to make with the help of, just a graphite or lead black pencil. Okay, now comes another surface. For example, I have this very small, glass with me, and it is having some fingerprints on it. They are not visible, of course, right? I will put them in a big glass. Okay. And in this big glass, there's a small aluminum foil I have placed at the bottom just to, just for the protection, nothing else. It has no else use. This is aluminum foil is easily available in the kitchen. Okay, so big glass, smaller glass. So this smaller glass has some fingerprints on it. So I will put it in the big glass like this. And then I need a simple glue. This is super glue, Elfie. What I'm going to do, I will add just 1 to 2 drops of this Elfie at the aluminum foil, not on my small glass, just at the bottom. And I'm going to do that now. Just 1 to 2 drops. So there it goes, the first drop and the second drop, and then I will cover it up with something and put it aside for 30 minutes. You will see that just after 30 minutes, the fingerprints that were not visible to the naked eye on this hard glass surface, they will become visible and very, very clearly visible. You can lift them up with the help of, the Scotch tape and save them, as I did in the first case with the help of. So interestingly, let me tell you that, okay, hard surfaces, if you have on hard surfaces, fingerprints are easy to pick. But how about porous surfaces? How about paper? How about paper? So now what I'm going to do, that I'm going to show you how we can develop fingerprints that are present on papers. This is a paper. I can take even a white paper, no problem. So what I'm going to do, that I'm going to mark my fingerprint on this paper. Is it visible to you? I hope not, because it's invisible. It's a latent fingerprint. But what I'm going to do is to cut this piece of paper here. I have cut this piece of paper, and the next thing is that I have something with me, which is yes, I have this empty glass container. Okay, I'm putting in it some tiny crystals of iodine. Iodine is a very famous, uh, in nutrient. We need it for the proper working of our thyroid glands. I do have some small crystals of iodine, nothing else. So I'm putting this iodine right at the bottom of this glass. Okay, so now this glass has iodine crystals, solid iodine. And what else I'm going to do, this marking here with my fingerprint is here. I will simply put it in this glass with the iodine crystals and cover it up, and place it aside. And I will show you in a while that how iodine is going to make the fingerprints visible to me, which were on the porous surfaces like glass. Okay, so this is how we have also come some chemicals like ninhydrin and many other chemicals which are used to development of for the development of the fingerprints on the porous surfaces. And nowadays we do have some other sophisticated tools. For example, this gun here. This is basically not a gun; it's simply a light that emits ultraviolet light, and then with the help of this light we can directly visualize the fingerprints which are there on the, let's say, on the glass surfaces, on the car, or anywhere. So you do not need to process with the help of powders or with the help of chemicals. You can directly watch them, and later you can take the photographs of them for the record, right? So this is the many ways by which you can basically develop the fingerprints. And I think our result of the iodine crystals is ready. Let me see where is my forceps, and I will show you that uh, how fast this method is. Yeah, and I think it's already giving me results. And see, this is the fingerprint that was there on my paper, on the paper, and it is not quite visible. Typical orange, typical violet type crystal color of my fingerprints is here. So this is how we can basically develop various fingerprints and use them for the identification of the principles. Achha, now we have an automated fingerprint identification system which makes the use of the computers. It is there with the FBI since 1999. It is called AFIS. It is Automated Fingerprint Identification System. And in 2014, it was basically integrated into next generation identification, or NGI system. And there are millions of 75 million fingerprints are there. And you can compare your fingerprint with 75, with thousands and hundred thousands of, fingerprints within a fraction of seconds in order to get a match, right? So computers have made the things very, very easy. And but you know that this is how, with the help of computers, we do the analysis of the fingerprints. Let me give you another a very famous case where fingerprints played some role. It was the case of Mayfield. So there were some blasts in 2004 in Madrid, and which killed 191 people, and 2,000 were injured. And this is the person. So what the Spanish police basically found a single incomplete fingerprint on a detonator present in a plastic bag, and they collected these fingerprints and they asked FBI for help, US FBI, and US FBI searched this fingerprint against the record, and it was matched with the American lawyer Mayfield. And Mayfield recently he was a recent convert to Islam, and because of that, they also thought that he might be the culprit because he recently took the case of another, so-called terrorist. And then 2 weeks later, Spanish police found a better match with an Algerian guy. And then FBI admitted that it had made multiple errors in fingerprint analysis. Actually, let me tell you that in this case, FBI has taken 10 minutiae from the suspect fingerprints and with the match, and all 10s were matching. But when then they increase the number of minutiae, I means the characteristic marks, to more, then they found the clear differences. So this was the very first case where some error happened in the fingerprint analysis, and it doesn't mean that fingerprint cannot be individualized. They can be individualized, but there should be some care must be taken. And there's a recent paper which shows that there are some false positive fingerprint identification, which means that it doesn't belong to you, but uh, fingerprint analysis shows a match. So it shows that 1 in 1,000 case, there could be some error in fingerprint identification, and it should be more systematic. It should be made error-free, and we should be more careful in making any conclusions based on the fingerprint analysis, as this Mayfield case basically shows us. So I think this is it for the day. I have already taken much of your time, and uh, oh, I think our second Alfie fingerprint is also ready, and you can see that one fingerprint is here, and it has two fingerprints. I hope that they are visible to you. So this is how Alfie can help you, or Supergram can help you, develop the fingerprints that are there on the solid surfaces. So this was with the help of the super glue. Okay, let me summarize that forensic science is the application of science to criminal law and civil law. It contains many professions, and we use scientific method, which is based on the observation, hypothesis, experiments, and conclusion. Forensic science not only analyzes the evidence, but it also testifies in the courtroom. We have certain standards like the Fry standard of the admissibility of the evidence that must be fulfilled. And fingerprint analysis, fingerprints are basically, the fingerprints is also called the friction ridges, because if we didn't have these fingerprints, I couldn't hold this glass in my hand. So they help us grasp the things. That's why they are called friction ridges. Okay, but they can also be used for the personal identification. This is how we, place our marks on everything we touch. Okay, and the analysis of fingerprint is based on three principles. First principle is that no two individuals have the same fingerprints. Fingerprints remain unchanged during the individual's lifetime. And third thing, that they have certain uh, features by which we can systematically classify them. Okay, so fingerprint patterns can be divided into three classes like loops, whorls, and arches. And we do the analysis basically starts by the ridge characteristics, which are the bifurcations, or enclosure, or the island, and this type of characteristic features the ridge pattern patterns have. Okay, and expert must demonstrate a point-by-point comparison in order to prove the identity of the individual. We use a computerized system which is called the AFIS in order to compare two fingerprints and make some conclusions out of it. Visible fingerprints are made when fingers touch some surfaces. For example, if they are having blood, paint, grease, or ink, then they can make visible prints. Otherwise, latent prints are not visible to naked eye, and they are either on hard surfaces or on the porous surfaces. On hard surfaces, we can make the use of simple powders, which I just showed you here, and a simple brush in order to make them visible. We can lift them up with the help of a scotch tape and then store them, preserve them. And for non-porous surfaces like paper, we can use iodine crystals. And now you can see that how beautifully colored this fingerprint has come. I think this is the best way of the creating invisible fingerprints. If they are on some kind of paper, you can see here, this is nice and very clear. And then we said that we can also use the super glue, and the example of super glue I just showed you. And with the help of super glue, you can also clearly develop nice fingerprints on the solid surfaces. Okay, so this was it about the forensic science for the lawyers. We, of course, with the limitation of the time, we couldn't cover everything, but I hope you enjoyed this session, and I'm thankful to Dr. Zubair of Alsi and Global Institute of Law for this opportunity to talk with you all. Thank you.
You're welcome, Dr. Zaheer. A number of people are asking various questions. So may I request you to please stop uh, screen sharing so that
Sure.
I can read to you the questions. So first question is asked by Syed Skandar Mehdi, who has asked that what's the lifespan of fingerprint on a particular surface?
So basically, you know, कि, our because of the perspiration, you know that we have our tips are wet, they contain some oils, and whatever we touch, we place our marks on them. So if somebody else touches this surface after me, he is going to ruin the fingerprints because they will merge with each other and they will be hard to see and analyze. Or if somebody, if we clean it, if them clean it with the help of even simple a tissue paper, they are gone. So if they are there, otherwise, because of the presence of oil, they have really long time, and they could be there. Would have stayed only be days, right? It could be days, um, uh, days long retention of the fingerprints on solid surfaces.
So Dr. Said, that has been fascinating. And although you say that the only laws you know are your in-laws, but we see that there was lots of references to law, to case law, to different statutes. So this is very interesting. Like most of our legal eagles, our viewers, um, they are the ones who actually escaped from science to become lawyers, and here we are imposing this science on them. I'm not really sure to what extent this is fair, but it shows that in your presentation there were references to literature, to history, to films, to fiction, and then lots of chemical science and biological sciences involved on a on a on a different level. Don't you see that when we come to study a particular phenomena, then these labels of science or social science or chemistry or maybe physics, they simply disappear because you have to understand a particular situation, and resolving a
Yeah.
crime is an important phenomena. And there we see that how different disciplines basically complement each other. So would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, that's an excellent comment, Zubair. You know that in the past there used to be no boundaries between the disciplines. You remember the old or the famous Muslim scientists? They used to, or the other scientists even, they used to be, uh, they used to be the expert in astrology and chemistry at the same time, and they used to be very good musicians at the same time. So in the past, there wasn't any distinct boundaries between the various disciplines, whether they belong to sciences or the arts or law, and people used to do work on the different fields, even within the organic chemistry and inorganic chemistry. But I believe that these distinct boundaries are now vanishing with the time, and people are now, trying to work on the interfaces of various disciplines like the law and science, and then science and social science, and there are many other disciplines. In the environmental science, you see that it's many disciplines which basically collaborate with each other. So I think that should be the future, where people from the different are so-called the different are different disciplines could collaborate with each other, should sit with each other and discuss matters of mutual interest.
I think this session is an excellent example of that
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
of
This is already.
interaction
Yep.
happening, right? And
Mhm.
I think this is very important to emphasize that when you choose your profession, it does not mean that it comes at the cost of you leaving whatever things that attracts you. So if you by chance happen to become a doctor or engineer, it does not mean that you cannot read literature. Now only thing you have to do is just read the books in your own field. But you see that in reality, all these disciplines will merge. Rather than merge, they will complement each other. So we would emphasize our audience, our viewers, that have your diverse interest. Never be shy to explore a particular area. So even if you have not laid your hand on forensic sciences, but you need it in order to get help for your case, you can grasp it. I mean, if Zaheer can tell us about Fryer's case, and then how, an expert, not only he has to work in the lab, but has to face cross examination by the opposition by the opposite lawyer. So although a person could be an expert, so the legal term that is used for such type of experts is the expert witness. So
Yep.
expert witness is just like any other witness. And just like any other witness goes through the process of cross examination, the expert witness also goes through the process of cross examination. And here, for the interest of our audience, we may mention O.J. Simpson's case. It was phenomenal case, and there are lots of documentaries, lots of films, and you can now follow OJ Simpson. He's out of the jail, and then he also has a YouTube channel, I have heard, though I'm not following him. But there you see that the whole case, like, it just depended. It wasn't science, it was basically how the clever lawyers basically beat the science there. Right. So if you have law on your in your side, yeah, so
Yeah.
it would be very useful. So Zahid, we have been talking a lot about science and iodine and all that stuff. I know you're a big fan of Mushtaq Yusfi. I would like to end this session on something which is very light.
After 1.5 hour session, I think it would be really hard to, you know, remember anything. But I do remember that Mushtaq Yusfi says that बंदा एक दफा प्रोफेसर हो जाए बंदा एक दफा प्रोफेसर हो जाए तो फिर वो तमाम उम्र प्रोफेसर ही रहता है हाँ वो बाद में अक्ल की बातें क्यों ना शुरू कर दे हाँ वो बाद में समझदारी की बातें ही क्यों ना शुरू कर दे
I know that is
तो
also
हमारा तो
my
वो हाल है
favorite.
कि यूसफी की टर्म में हम तो प्रोफेसर के प्रोफेसर
हाँ, आई थिंक बिल्कुल ऐसा है कि हम
सही
प्रोफेसर बन गए तो बाकी सारी जिंदगी जो है वो हम प्रोफेसर ही रहेंगे. बट आई थिंक
एग्जैक्टली
हाँ, तो इस इज फैंटास्टिक. हमें तो आप जैसे और भी प्रोफेसर चाहिए हैं. तो चलिए फ्यूचर में जो है वो हम और भी लोगों को लेके आएंगे अपने इस फोरम पर. So people maybe will be looking for people from medical jurisprudence, because medical jurisprudence is also linked with forensic
yep.
sciences. And I must emphasize in conclusion that it was more of a taster. Dr. Zaheer offers a full-fledged course which you can enroll if you are interested at lumps. And he has been teaching that course for past several years. And if something good has come out of all this COVID, it's that the boundaries have been
It's that course.
completely disappeared, right? So you don't have to qualify to get admission in LUMS. Rather, you can just basically sit at your home and get state of the art knowledge, the same knowledge that any LUMS grad would be getting. So we would highly encourage you to explore your option. And we would also expect that this is not our first and the last session with Dr. Zaheer. Rather, he will keep continuing and appearing on our forum of Global Institute of Law. So, on behalf of my legal eagles and the team of Global Institute of Law, Oxford, I'm very grateful to you, Dr. Zaheer, and we look forward to interacting with you in future.
Thank you, Dr. Zubair. It was really a matter of pleasure, and I'm thankful to Global Institute of Law and to you for the invite. It was really, I really enjoyed this session, and I hope that it was helpful for your viewers as well. So I'm quite open to, do such kind of sessions in near future as well.
Thank you very much. I think we'll look forward to our collaborations in the future. Have a nice evening, and Allah Hafiz from my side.
You too. Allah Hafiz.